gonna take crackerjack timing, Wang.
Total concentration. You ready, Jack?
I was born ready.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. And recently we got some news about some creators that are going back onto the creator-owned path, and got me thinking about kind of what this all means in context with what we've all just experienced here in the comic book industry. Obviously, everything kind of shut down with the pandemic, and it feels like creators ranging from superstar big-name creators to kind of more lower-level dependable talents are kind of noticing that the big two might not be as quite reliable for helping to pay the bills and taking care of their families moving forward. And I feel like they're hedging their bets. And here to talk with me about this is my good friend, Aaron Sparrow. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
All right, so just to get this out of the way, I know you know this, Aaron, but I will tell the viewers, if you noticed in my last video, my voice was trailing off pretty bad at the end. I am sick, so if my voice fails me here today, I did bring in Aaron because he can fill up a room with opinions and voice, just in case my opinions and voice falter me and I'm not able to get it out there.
Well, it's a good thing that I tend to write verbose characters like Darkwing Duck, because I too never quite shut up.
Well, here at Thinking Critical, that's a good thing, and we certainly appreciate it. The two that we're going to talk about as far as moving to creator-owned comics, we're going to talk about Donny Cates and Steve Orlando. Then we're going to talk about some tweets by Viktor Bogdanovic after that. But Donny Cates, obviously the big superstar writer over at Marvel, currently working on Venom, has really done a lot of great things with Thor, really amped up the interest and enthusiasm in that title. Announced that he has 3 new creator-owned projects coming out. Also, at the same time, Steve Orlando, who's mostly known for his work over at DC, but has certainly worked at Marvel and other publishers as well, also announced that he had 3 new creator-owned projects coming up. Now, both of these creators obviously have done creator-owned works in the past, but feels like it's in reaction to everything that happened with the pandemic, especially with what happened at Marvel. The industry leader essentially shut down, went pencils down, and people weren't working for, upwards of 2 months. And do you feel like this is something that we're going to see a lot more moving forward, where people are kind of hedging their bets and maybe betting on themselves?
Oh, I definitely think so. I think that the industry, even though most of these people just right before the pandemic were out there saying the industry's fine, the industry's never been healthier, everything's pie in the sky, deep down, they all knew that the industry was weak, and COVID just came along and completely exposed the soft underbelly of the comic industry. It only took 2 weeks for everything to collapse. Marvel at this point, I still don't think is pencils up. I think they're just kind of like running out the clock on the things that they already had in the pipeline for the rest of the year. At least that's what it seems like so far from the solicitations. So I'm sure guys like Donny, guys like Steve Orlando, Donny obviously I think has more of a following than Steve does, but Steve has crowdfunded things in the past and been successful. I think that these guys are looking at all the people that are crowdfunding comics, Comicsgate and whatnot, coming in, and rookies and guys that don't really have like a big name, but get fairly well known on YouTube, having all this success, and they're like, well, wait a minute, why are we leaving all that money on the table? We could go out and we could do this. So I think it makes sense from just taking care of yourself and taking care of your family. It makes sense to cut out the middleman. I'm sure Donny Cates gets paid very well by Marvel, but I don't think that it's so much that he couldn't go out and do a couple of creator-owned books and make more money, have more control, and less headaches.
Well, and there's also the fact that if Donny Cates wrote the most magnificent Thor story of all times, or the craziest Venom story that would project perfectly to the big screen, or some type of cartoon or a live adapted television production, like, they will take those stories and they'll run with them. And he really won't get the credit that he deserves, and he certainly won't get the financial compensation that he gets deserved, because those aren't his characters. And Marvel is just known for not really giving those royalties out when you put in that hard work. So why would you go put out your best creative work on things that you're not really going to get rewarded for, when you could go over, do some creator-owned work for Image or maybe one of the other smaller publishers, or even go into the crowdfunding route, which we've seen recently Sean Gordon Murphy's done. And if that gets adapted, or maybe it gets bigger, you reap all the benefits.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, a concern for writers and artists working at Marvel. you get paid better. The royalty structure at DC is much better than the one at Marvel. And I don't know if it's always been that way or if that's something that's happened since the Disney acquisition, but you don't really get all of the credit that you deserve, and certainly not all of the financial compensation that you deserve when you've created a character that they then go and make millions of dollars with. Jim Starlin talks about how he gets more money from small characters that he created for DC than he did from Marvel and Disney for all the use that they got out of Thanos with these billion-dollar blockbuster movies. So,
or you think about a current creator out there, Brian Hitch, essentially created the look of Captain America in the MCU, that magnificent Captain America look. Do we think that he's gotten the millions or even more than $1 million that he deserves for creating iconic look that was used to make billions of dollars worldwide?
No, I think that he had to buy a ticket to see the movie like everybody else. That's typically how these things work, sadly. Like I said, Steranko got next to nothing for creating Thanos, and they used him in all these films. So I can see why creators like Donny Cates want to go out and do something on their own. Now correct me if I'm wrong, but as prolific as Donny is and as good a stories as he's told at Marvel, I can't think off the top of my head many characters that he's created that aren't derivative of something else. Like, obviously, everybody goes, oh, Cosmic Ghost Rider. But, he mashed up the Punisher and Ghost Rider, two existing characters. And yeah, he told a new story with them, but that's not something that he created, necessarily from whole cloth. And even Donny, as much as he is, seen as swinging for the fences with the stories that he's telling, I don't think he's giving 100%. I think that he's holding back. I think he's got better stories, better characters of his own, maybe. And, I could be wrong, but my guess is that he's got things that he wants to keep for himself because he realizes that there's no money in giving Marvel great IP. You can tell good stories with the existing IP, have a good time, and get paid well. But when it comes to like creating things and new concepts and things like that, you're going to want to hold that back for yourself because the financial incentive is just not there.
It would be pretty funny if in the end all these YouTubers and critics that the pros have been lambasting and hating on for so long, that it eventually showed them the life raft that gave them financial security and creative freedom to do what they wanted while they went out there and they certainly didn't create the market. The market's been there for a while. And you look at Brian Pulido over there with I think it's Coffin Comics. He does, I think, a crowdfunded comic quarterly. They always do over $250,000. So it's not like the formula wasn't there for success, but it had been used limited. Now you have people like Ethan Van Sciver. You have Richard C. Meyer, who've been very critical of the comic book industry and have been much derided and essentially kicked out as not wanting to belong. But they certainly are showing a lot of these creators a blueprint for success outside of Marvel and DC, where you can kind of do your own thing and you don't have to be relying on somebody else's characters and someone else's success.
People coming from the mainstream are never going to admit that, and it's a shame because they should. It doesn't matter whether or not you like the messenger. If the message is correct, you should be able to, give credit where credit is due and say, hey, maybe I don't like those guys, but those guys were right. And YouTubers have proven right about the comic industry. They've proven right about crowdfunding. They've been proven right about it being the future of the industry. And now you see it. You see it with the top people from the industry deciding that they're going to go jump in. Sean Gordon Murphy is doing plot holes, creator owned, and now Donnie's going to do some things. It makes sense. It makes sense for the individual. And this is where the market's heading, and corporate controlled comics are falling apart. I don't even know if Disney or Warner Brothers is going to want to be in the comic business in another year. So, you'd better start putting that life raft in the water.
Well, I think they'll be around, but it's certainly it's a good play to diversify your risk and bet a little bit on yourself that you can create some great ideas that can translate to other places, and it allows you to connect with the audience a little bit more on a personal level. Now, kind of moving away from that topic, obviously, so we said they were going to talk about that first. I do want to talk about Viktor Bogdanovic. Obviously, a lesser known creator. I think he's a terrific artist. Obviously, when DC Comics launched their New Age of Heroes, John Romita Jr. was on The Silencer, and then Viktor Bogdanovic was actually the artist that replaced him, I think, after 3 issues. And it was a huge step up. His art was far better than John Romita Jr.'s for the Silencer, who I think is probably the best character, maybe the second best character to come out of the new age of heroes. And then recently he's been used as part of the launch of the new Wolverine series with Ben Percy, where he was kind of the number 2 artist on that big double issue, with one of the Kuberts being the A artist, he being B. On that one, I think he kind of outshined him as well. I think he had the best art. So he's definitely a creator that's on the rise, a name that people should be knowing. And he went out on social media. He had a few things to say that I thought were very interesting, and I wanted to get your take on these spins. So the first one was he sent out a tweet with a picture of 3 different covers. One of them was Empire, and it says Empire X-Men #2, and it says Jonathan Hickman, Jerry Duggan, Benjamin Percy, Leah Williams, but there's no mention of the artist on the cover. And then he sends out a cover of Justice League by Scott Snyder, no mention of the artist on that series. And then James Bond 007, complete Warren Ellis omnibus, no mention of the artist on that. And this is what he tweeted. If this trend continues, I will stop working with writers. I love all these authors, but this industry has a long, dark history of exploiting and degrading artists whose vision and storytelling shape the entire DC and Marvel universe. Is this something you've noticed as well, where artists really aren't getting the credit? Because I know you like to steal a lot of the credit from Silvani, right?
Oh yeah, all the time. And that's why to this day we just communicate through a thick wall of lawyers. Actually, in the case of Silvani, we both got so screwed on the initial run of Darkwing that in not getting proper credit, that when it came around that we were able to do our second series at Joe Books, I insisted that we be credited as storytellers. So it's his name and my name together on the same credit line. Of course, when they do the covers, they still put, I think traditionally they still put the writer at the top. So my name was above his on the covers. But, on the interior, we wanted to make sure that, hey, we're both storytellers here. We both give feedback on each other's work. I give him a script. He comes back and he gives me feedback. I alter my script depending on what he wants to do. Then he lays it out and he draws it. And then I go back in and I change my script according to what he's drawn. So, it's a give and take. But am I saying that, I'm more important than Silvani in the book? Hell no. I think that the writer is, comics are visual medium. So I think that the artist is almost always more important than the writer. A good art can save a bad story. And I think that, Viktor Bogdanovic is right in the way that he's talking about how people are, undervalued. Like, for example, out of those names off the cover that you read off of Empire, aside from Jonathan Hickman, is there anybody on that lineup that is going to make me buy a book? Not really.
Maybe
more so
but certainly Scott Snyder and Warren Ellis in the past.
No, I'm talking about
Oh, the X-Men.
Yeah. I'm specifically talking about the Empire book. I'll get to the others. But with Empire, it's like, okay, so Jonathan Hickman, pretty good rep with me from his Avengers work. I've not enjoyed the Dawn of X stuff as much as I enjoyed House of X and Powers of X. I really kind of feel like it's floundering. But, for the most part, he's built up a lot of credit with me. I first read his work with Nightly News. And then, when he got onto the Marvel books and Fantastic Four and everything, I really loved all that. And I actually am one of the people that loved the main Secret Wars book when he did that. I thought that the final confrontation between Reed and Doom was just perfect. And if the Marvel Universe had just kind of ended there, I think I would have been fine with it. When it comes to, say, the Dynamite book with Warren Ellis, I'm not sure who his artist was on that, so I apologize if I'm doing them a disservice. But
it's an omnibus, so I'm imagining it was more than one.
Oh yeah, because Diamond doesn't generally have consistent artists on titles, and they don't necessarily always have top tier talent. They have people who are coming in and kind of cutting their teeth. So I can understand in the case of that why Warren Ellis would get promoted, and then if there's 15 different artists on it, maybe why they're not credited. But in Victor's case, if he was working on that Empire book and it said Jonathan Hickman, and he was doing the art, then the next name I think that should be on there is his, because he's far more likely to get me to buy that book even than Hickman's name at this point. Out of the other people that you mentioned, I like Leah Williams. I liked Amazing Mary Jane. I thought it was a lot of fun. So Leah Williams gets a little bit of credit from me. But Victor would carry far more weight because he's just such a fantastic artist, and he deserves the credit and he deserves to be hyped. But I think what's going on with these companies is artists are by far more of a more of a financial burden on producing a book than the writers in a lot of cases. So, they obviously make a higher page rate because their work is so much more intensive. I can write a comic in, a couple of days, but it takes them the whole month. So, to draw it generally and to put all that detail in that he does, he definitely deserves more. But I think what's going on with Marvel is, like I said, they don't want to create superstar artists. And I think that they have kind of felt that way ever since the 90s when the seven Image founders broke loose and formed their own company. I think ever since then they've promoted writers over artists. So I think Victor is kind of hitting the nail on the head here.
Gary Frank actually came back and replied to him, and this is what Victor said. It's been going on for years. There's zero promotion. Artists are usually excluded from project development, and they're rotating them until they barely know what book they're drawing anymore. Two to three different artists on one issue is a new low, and I see it more and more. Obviously talking about how back in the day, John Byrne wasn't just the artist on, Fantastic Four. He helped develop those stories, and it feels like the artistic talent isn't being given a say in the stories on how things should develop. And that's too bad, because there's a lot of really good creative talents out there. They're not being developed correctly, and they're certainly not being given the credit they deserve. Now, this is the last thing that I did want to talk about specifically that Victor tweeted. Rob Liefeld had sent out a tweet basically talking about he's seeing more and more significant talents not being tied down to exclusives. And this is what Victor had to say. Turn down both Marvel and DC's offer for an exclusive. I think it only makes sense if it's tied to a specific project. Locking yourself up for 2 years, not knowing what you're going to be working on, not being able to renegotiate your page rate. I really don't see the point.
I completely agree with him. And here's what's going on, I think, at Marvel, is they're locking people up into exclusives, but they're not telling them what they want to work on, because with their flood the shelves strategy, they only want to put a big name or an artist who's got a good following or who's got a good art style, somebody who's like really make an impact. First 2 issues, and then the retailers are kind of locked into the next couple, because Marvel's gonna most series they're burning out by issue 8 anyway. They're cutting and running because they're not making books that can survive. And with all the variant covers, like, how would you even know what artist was on the interior? That is a constant complaint that I'm hearing from customers. It's ridiculous. So I can understand why Victor wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't want to sign an exclusive contract, and then have editors telling me what it is I'm going to be writing from month to month.
A 2-year Batman exclusive.
Yeah, if you have a consistent, if they say, hey, you're going to be on this specific book for 2 years, we're signing you to an exclusive. Okay, if I got called tomorrow and they're like, we want you to do Moon Knight and Viktor Bogdanovic is going to be the artist for 2 years. You guys are locked in. I'd be like, hell yeah, let's do it. That's going to be great, because I can sit down with Victor and we can plan everything out. What does he want to draw? What does he think is exciting? We can kind of go back and forth and really work out a plan. But if you've got an artist for like 2 months, and then you're on to the next person, and then a fill-in guy, and then somebody from Tumblr who's friends with the editor, and then after that, who knows who you get, and then your book is canceled, and then you're just handed something else. Who wants to do that? The problem with Marvel right now is that everything is controlled by editorial. They're not letting writers, I don't think, pitch the ideas that they're passionate about. Editorial, who I do not feel is creative at this, at this current Marvel. I don't feel like they've got a handle on what they're doing. And I think that their product, definitely illustrates that.
I believe it was Jordan White, one of the key figures of the Legion of Doofuses himself, came up with the Age of X-Man storyline, which was the big event before they relaunched into House of X Powers of 10, and it absolutely flopped because it was a stupid story, and you could tell that none of the creators were invested in it.
Well, I feel like that's the same thing that happened with Children of the Atom, which now I don't even know if it's coming out, and hopefully it's not, because it just...
Limited series. That's the latest news.
Oh, is it really? Oh, well, yeah, good. Then it can be ignored. But I think that's the problem. I think that the editors have these terrible ideas that they're handing to the writers, and then the writers are just like, all right, well, I'll see what I'm under a contract. I better see what I can do with this. Obviously, I don't think Donny Cates is under that sort of deal. I think he probably gets to do what he wants to do. But that's not the case for most of the talent working at Marvel, and I can see how that would just like suck any life out of the stories or any excitement out of you to tell these stories, because If I'm handed a garbage story from an editor who doesn't know what he's doing, I'm not going to be able to do my best work, and I'm not going to be invested in it.
Yeah, I will say this: I like the cut of Victor's jib. I think he's actually a really great artist. I've been a fan of his since he took over on Silencer, and I thought he really stole the show with that Wolverine story with the vampires and everything. I thought it was really cool. So I'm really excited to see what he does, and I'm glad that he spoke out. Someone needs to stick up for themselves and put out the information out there. You know what I mean?
All the new Age of Heroes stuff, I think the second tier was better than the first, but by then, the writing was kind of on the wall as to what was going to happen. Victor, I thought, was better than John Romita on Silencer. I thought I agree with you. I think that was the best book that came out of the new Age of Heroes. I think that when Aaron Lopresti came on to Damage, that book got a lot better.
I agree.
But so, I do think that these guys are crazy talented, and maybe they do need to be pushing the artists more than the writers, because that's your bread and butter, man. That's what the industry is about. I will open a book and I'll thumb through it, and if the art looks bad, I don't really care who the writer is. I'll put it back.
Yeah, there's a lot of artists that once you see their name attached to a project, you know it's something that you're interested in. Unfortunately, it's all older artists. It feels like it's another comparison with the WWE in comic books. They're out there trying to make themselves bigger than the talent. So every year when they want to promote something, you got to bring back Rob Liefeld or one of these older talents, because they've completely stagnated the development of their younger talents. They haven't pushed them enough, and they haven't created really any superstars, especially out of the artists.
Well, I don't think that their editors are capable of it. I think that they're hiring, the editors are overworked. I am positive that they're underpaid, and they're hiring them right out of college without any experience, because, those are the people who will take the jobs that are, getting that low level of pay. And I don't think that these people have the experience. I'm not denigrating them. I'm saying that they're being put in, because I don't know everybody. I'm just saying that they're being put in an untenable position, and you've got some editors that are good and some editors that are terrible, but both groups are being put in an untenable position of having to just churn out product. It doesn't even matter if it's good. They don't have time to develop anything. They don't have time to develop the skills of working with an artist or a writer, and really kind of like developing them and pointing out the weaknesses in their stories. It's like they just get a script and they just pass it through, and everything's a first draft, and nobody ever goes back and hey, this is inconsistent, or this person's out of character, or this dialogue doesn't work. I don't feel like anybody's getting those notes, and that's so important. I mean, I'm an editor and a writer, and when I write something, I still pass it around to my editor friends and have them give me notes on it, because you get too close to the work. Everybody needs some advice. Everybody needs some guidance. Everybody needs people to try and poke holes in their story to make sure that it's airtight.
Well, I will say the good news is it feels like my voice held up today, so hopefully it'll hold up on the next recording. Aaron, I do appreciate your insight and your perspective on all this. Very interesting information. It's certainly something that we'll keep our eye on moving forward.
Yeah, and good on Victor for speaking out. I think that there's so many people in the industry that help us make the books great, from the artists to the colorists to the letterers that don't get the proper credit, especially letterers. Did I say letterists earlier? Letterers. I'm sorry, it's very late as we record this. But, letterers, especially, if they do their job right, you never even notice that they did it, because their job is to not distract from the art. So if they're doing their job right, you're not really even noticing all the work that they put in. So yeah, I think that these people need more credit. They need more recognition. And, in the case of artists especially, they need to be promoted and they need to be elevated to the level that they deserve.